Hey, how's it going? Thanks for coming, guys. This is a Talk Stronger Than Fear mental health in the developer community. You may be wondering to yourself, who is this person? And my name is Ed Finkler. It said it back here. That's me at the bottom. If you want Twittery or websitey or things, they're there. So who am I? I'm a dad. I've been a web developer a long time, coming up on 20 years now. Occasional musician of a sort. I'm a big nerd, kind of do nerdy stuff. But I also have a mental illness, or actually I have a couple. I have this thing, they call that comorbidity, which is scary, but it just means you have two things. Now, I'm just a regular old average Joe with these kinds of things. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not an expert, I do not have formal training in this. I have taken a course, Mental Health First Aid, which I think is a really good course. I'll mention that in a little bit. But I'm really here to talk about what it's like to deal with mental health issues from my perspective as a developer, but also at the same time to talk about it, how it impacts our society, how it impacts our tech communities and open source communities, and the kinds of things that I think we can do to change how we interact with that, how to promote mental wellness. So I'm going to do a little formal survey here, and I do this frequently with these kinds of crowds. Now, there's going to be some interaction on your part. You may be required to raise your hand or not raise your hand, as the case may be. I hope you're all comfortable with that. How many of you need glasses or contacts? You got to wear those to see. Now, I'm serious about that raising your hand thing. There you go. Okay, I like that. That's very good. I enjoyed that. There's a couple of you who don't. The rest of us will be culled from the herd at some point. But, you know, now I want to ask you, those of you who do suffer from this eye disability, are you afraid to tell people about it? Like, do you think to yourself, man, I am not comfortable telling people that I wear contacts? Has that ever happened? All right, it's supposed to be participatory, so you can say yes. Vigorously, violently shake your head. That would help me. Have you ever had people say, it seems, could you try harder? Has anyone ever said that to you? Could you try harder to see better? Have you tried squinting? Has anyone ever suggested that?
When I was a kid.
Yes, well, that was a horrible thing, even as a child, to do. But, that's kind of unfortunate. Is that,
Oh, did you break the projector?
what are you guys doing under there?
Why is this not? There we go. Sorry.
Aren't you running Perl now or something? What's going on?
That's good.
All right. Hey, get the DevOps team here. Anyway, so we talk about that. So we're not afraid to talk about this, but we have these most of us have these chronic conditions with our eyes, and that make it so that we need assistance to cope in society, to do things that we all consider sort of normal, productive activities. Now, another condition that my family has some experience with, and I think a lot of people do, is diabetes. My brother and my dad both developed type 2 diabetes, so I'm kind of shit out of luck in that respect. Now, I'm curious, I'm going to ask sort of a similar question about that. How many of you feel comfortable talking about diabetes? Or like if you had it, would it be okay for people to know? Let me ask the first question. Would you be comfortable talking about it? Again, maybe not the first thing you'd bring up. Like you start your day, hey, diabetes. Let's talk about it at the stand-up. So we're fairly comfortable with that. It's not necessarily secret. It is something that we don't have a cure for, and we have to have treatment of one form or another to deal with that. Otherwise, it gets pretty bad. People can die from it. But we have stuff like you can get treatment, and it's a chronic condition, but you can cope and be a productive member of society in the same respects that we expect of most people. Now, There's another thing that unfortunately I dealt with. My brother passed away about a year ago from cancer. And that's something that touches lots of people's lives. Gosh, I can't imagine any one of us not knowing somebody who has had to deal with that, lost somebody, or have maybe dealt with that ourselves. And this is another hand-raising situation. Would you feel comfortable talking with, let's say, colleague, coworker, if the topic of cancer comes up? Would you feel okay talking about that? So a hand raise on that. I mean, again, probably not a way to sort of motivate the team, let's get pumped about it. But it's something we talk about pretty openly in society. And in our culture, we talk pretty openly. It didn't used to always be that way. 50 years ago, no, it was not like that. We talk much more openly about cancers, well, various kinds of cancers than we did, at that time. Now I'm we'll continue along on this theme, but how many of you would be comfortable talking with your boss about a mental health issue? Okay. Yeah. Some of you raising your hands, some not sure. Some of you shaking your heads like, hell to the no, I would not do that. How about a colleague? Somebody you work with. Right, okay. Well, a friend, family member, somebody, you feel pretty close to, feel comfortable sharing with. So most of us would probably feel okay with that, right? So I think it's interesting, to talk about this stuff. And I want you to kind of remember that as we're going through some of this stuff, and the context that we put that in, and the way, and what we're comfortable with, what we're willing to talk about, and how that impacts us, and how it impacts how we deal with these kinds of things. We're going to talk a little bit about my diagnoses. I've been dealing with stuff. I mean, I've always kind of dealt with stuff, but I guess formally I was probably diagnosed with something when I was about 13. But there's two primary things that I deal with and still do to this day. The first thing is something called generalized anxiety disorder. Anxiety disorders are really common mental disorders, and it's these things are things that like the official diagnoses are sort of like this kind of stuff. And sometimes you fit those things well, sometimes you don't. But that's the thing I officially have for the sake of billing insurance and stuff like that. And I think the best way to put it is that I have fight or flight reactions when it's not appropriate. And so an appropriate time for a human being to have a fight or flight reaction is like if a lion is going to eat them. That is an appropriate time to have this reaction. And our brains have evolved and our bodies have evolved to have these kinds of reactions in situations like that where we feel threatened. So that's an appropriate time to have it. I need to either roundhouse kick this lion and get it to, go away, or I need to run like hell to get away from it. That is what I have this fight or flight reaction, and that's an appropriate time to have that. Now, a less appropriate time to have that kind of reaction is I'm going by myself to meet friends at a bar that I've never been to. And I find myself so uncomfortable with the idea of going into this place where I don't know what it's going to be like, and I'm not sure where they're sitting, and I don't really know kind of what the rules are like when I go in there, because different bars are different, and sometimes they're sort of weird, and some of them have it's like, no, you're not supposed to go that way, things like that. That I'm just like, I'm out. And I go back to my car, and I drive home. And I've done this because I was so freaked out at the idea of, I guess, being embarrassed, feeling like I didn't know what I was supposed to do. And it's hard because logically I'm like, that's obviously not the case. But I still have that reaction. And another time it's not appropriate, that happens to be a lot, is working with different cities' public transportation systems. If you know anything about this term onboarding or getting people onto a system, the onboarding process of public transportation is generally poor. They don't really tell you what you're supposed to do. you kind of have to show up, and there's some, maybe they give you some instructions, but it's kind of vague. They don't really do a great job of this. So I don't ever take the bus ever for anything. And the reason I don't is because I don't know what's going to happen when I step on that bus, and how do I pay? I don't know. The last time I took the bus, I was probably less than 10 years old. I mean, like not a school bus, a pay-for bus. And it involved me putting like tokens or coins or something, and also I had somebody with me at the time. And I don't usually carry around a lot of change at this point in my life. And so I don't know what's going to happen. Now, maybe there's a token system, maybe it's a bartering, I don't know. Is it like a nightclub and they let you in if they like the way you look? I don't know. But the fact is I don't know, and that I get so freaked out that I'm going to do the wrong thing there that I'm like, I'm just going to call a Lyft. Yeah, I don't care if it costs me $50, it's fine. I'm absolutely comfortable doing that. But those are the kinds of things that I kind of deal with, and this falls under this idea of generalized anxiety disorder. And I also have something called ADHD. I think most people are sort of familiar with at least the idea of it. There's actually a couple variants of how they classify ADHD and a couple things that they see with it. Now, for me, it manifests as I sometimes have trouble focusing on stuff, particularly things that I'm not super interested in. Or there's times where my brain just wants to jump around from thing to thing, and I can't stay on one thing to be productive. And I also tend to avoid less appealing tasks. And I think most people be like, yeah, I avoid less appealing tasks. I think most people kind of do. But it's avoidance to a point where it is destructive, where it causes problems in my life, right? I have a really low frustration threshold. This is something that oftentimes people don't realize it actually goes along with ADHD, is that I have this really low frustration threshold. So, and my emotions tend to be very intense. So I will get more upset about things than sometimes maybe seems appropriate. And it probably is more than should be appropriate, but I still have those emotions. So that still happens. And I'm really, really good at constructing bad outcomes and then hyper-focusing on them. And so one of the things I've found is that I'm really good at free association. And the negative side of this is that I can freely associate myself into some kind of scenario where my whole life melts down and there is no point in going any further. I'm going to lose my job because I'm going to lose my job and we're going to be homeless. And no one's ever going to hire me again, and I'm just going to lose it because my boss said something like, hey, could I talk to you on Monday when you come in? Right? And that happens. That really happens. And I've had major freak out sessions because of that kind of thing. That was entirely created inside my brain. And there was little evidence to back this up. And so when you talk about this, I have these two diagnoses. And again, it's just these things that I tend to fall under. And a lot of times this stuff is for procedural purposes and billing purposes for insurance and stuff like that. But this is just kind of the way my brain works. And I have both these things. And it's not like they're really a duality. There's really just, that's the way my brain works. And a lot of people sort of have brains kind of like that. Now, I take medication. Every day I have to take pills. I take about 5 different pills every day to deal with this stuff. And then I also see a therapist about every couple of weeks, and I try to talk about how and why I do the things that I do, why I have the reactions I do to given situations, things that were problematic, things that caused me pain, or I felt like didn't go well, or I wish I could have, sort of done differently with it, caused me some kind of trauma, and then come up with strategies to address those. And a lot of that has to do with, especially when you're dealing with folks who have anxiety disorders, a lot of that has to do with sort of training your brain to have different kinds of reactions and to modify those things. And that's not something you do like that. It's something that you have to work on and exercise and practice. And the thing that's important, and you bring this back into the context of being a developer, this impacts my work every day. And yes, I'm medicated, and yes, I see a therapist, and I'm relatively stable in most senses, but it impacts my work every single day. There are parts of my day where I'm like, whoa, hold on, I gotta focus. I'm not getting shit done. I can't get anything done here. What is going on? And some days it's really bad, and some days it's it's not so bad. Now, for me, especially medicated and helping out with that stuff, I have a day where maybe I have a problem. It used to be a week or two where like I couldn't get anything done. So I've learned to deal with that. But it impacts my work every day. And sometimes it gives me superpowers. The way that my brain works absolutely makes it so that I'm better at some stuff, some aspects of my job, the jobs that I've had, the kinds of things that I do. I'm better at it than a lot of people because of it. That free association stuff, I pattern match really, really fast. And I make connections a lot of times that people don't necessarily pick up on as fast. So I'm really good at that. And for a while I was kind of like, well, why don't you see that? That's just like, no. It turns out I'm just kind of different like that. One aspect that is that I think about is that I tend to anticipate sort of like common security issues faster with stuff. Like earlier on, it's like, well, if we do this, what could a user do to like throw some kind of input at it that we maybe don't want to have? And that stuff's just kind of wired in my brain. So I make those associations really quickly. Like, well, if we make this decision, what does that happen if we, our system's going to be, it's going to have this part. And I make I'm a web developer. I make web stuff. So I'm thinking about the train of like, client to the server over HTTP and the kind of stuff you can do with that, and then trace that into the system, and then trace that back into the database or whatever backend stuff we've got, or Q server or whatever, and trying to figure out, well, what's this stuff, how could we inject that? Is there some part in here that we're not actually touching it, we're not actually filtering it, we're not actually validating it? I also tend to be pretty good at empathizing like strongly with users, and I do another talk that's called How to Be a Great Developer, which is really all about the non-technical stuff that I think you have to do to be good at your job as a developer, and that if you don't do those, you're kind of a shitty developer, and in my mind. And a big thing is empathy with users. Most of the things that we are making for someone else to use. And it is important that you have the ability to empathize with their experience. And I think because I have had a lot of experience not feeling like I was particularly well understood, I think that has made me think a lot about those kinds of issues. So my natural tendency is to try to empathize with people and try to understand where they might be coming from and not trust my own experiences as universal, which is probably the biggest mistake I always make, is I assume that my experience is like other people's, and it's not. So sometimes this gives me superpowers. My career has benefited, and I am good at my job in some ways because of the way my brain works. And sometimes it completely ruins me, the way my brain works. Sometimes it has screwed up my career, but more commonly it has screwed up relationships. It has made things more difficult. It has made things more painful. And the toughest thing really about all that is this feeling of being around a bunch of other folks who are in the sort of the same situation you are, maybe on the same team, maybe they're classmates of mine, when I was in elementary school even, to junior high, to high school, to college, and on to doing stuff in the workplace. Feeling like there's all these other folks who kind of do the same things that I'm supposed to do, but why is it they seem to be able to do it more effectively than I can, and they don't have as much problem? Like, why is it that they could read 100 pages of Dostoevsky in a night, and I cannot push my way through it? I find myself rereading the same page like 6 or 7 times. And it's not like I don't understand it's not like it's too dense. I can't figure it out. I can follow it, but it's like I can't push myself on. I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD until I was 27. It dramatically impacted my school. And because that was just the way my brain worked. I don't think of it as disease. I just think that's the way my brain worked. But There was no adaptation at that time when I was in school for those kinds of things. So I wasn't, I figured out how to cope and get through it. But you feel so alone in that situation. You feel so disconnected because it seems like other people are able to get everything done, and they're kind of getting along, and things seem like they're okay for them, and you're like freaking out and screaming inside, and you don't understand why it's so difficult and so frustrating and so hard for you. And it turns out there's actually a lot of people who feel like this. A lot of people. And this is the kind of stuff that we're trying to fight with this campaign that I started in 2013. How does this affect us, and how does this affect us if we're talking about workforce, we talk about culture and things like that? It turns out there's actually a lot of folks who deal with this. Most studies that you'll see, if you're just talking about the US, generally most other countries like the US, whatever you want to call that, about 20% of people are dealing with a mental disorder at any given time in the US. So are we abnormal? Well, not really. It's actually pretty common. It's actually really common. And in fact, anxiety disorders, big thing that I deal with, is in fact the most common types. You're talking about like 10% of people, just the general population. Now, the World Health Organization released this study in 2014. It's called the Global Burden of Disease, or 2004. That's how we say that, not 2004. 2004, it's like a Dune novel. So the Global Burden of Disease, they did a study, and they have this metric in it they talk about called disease burden, and there's some math involved, and that's why I'm a web developer, because there's no math. But a premature death, really, plus kind of years lived with the disability, is the way they come up with this metric. So it's an idea to try to measure the impact on a society that a disease has, or a category of disease. And in that, they say that the burden of mental disorders is the largest of all disorder categories in North America. That's larger than cardiovascular disease, and that's larger than cancer. Now, the mortality rate is significantly lower. But if you're talking about years lived with and lost to the disability, it is much, much higher. This is a quote from that study. In all regions, neuropsychiatric conditions are the most important causes of disability, accounting for around 1/3 of years lost to disability among adults aged 15 years and over. So you're just talking about the general population. I'm not talking about some subset of people who really like writing code. I'm talking about the general population. The most important cause of disability. If we talk about economic costs, and some of these, sometimes measuring this stuff is a little fuzzy because these are estimates. Like, they didn't go around and tally up numbers for every organization. And I mean, corporations, unless they're publicly traded, they don't have to release this kind of stuff, but they make some estimates based on this. So take it for what it is. But in that, they identify the mental health conditions in this PDF that you can look up. So it has some facts, some economic cost facts about it. Are the second leading cause of workplace absenteeism. I don't know what the first is. Someone asked that? It's a good question. I don't know. Maybe they would just say common diseases like cold and flu, something. Probably something like that. I found workers, and we're just talking about depression here. Workers with depression lose significantly more time than workers without depression. Per week, they are out significantly more. And again, we're just talking about depression, which is just one aspect. In fact, not the most common category of mental disorder in the United States. $43.7 billion in absenteeism from work, lost productivity, and direct treatment. That's a very significant amount of cash. This has a real impact on productivity in the workplace. Now, as part of the open sourcing mental illness campaign, I've done surveys in both in 2014 and 2016. This data is from 2014. The 2016 stuff we're still kind of working on in terms of examining it, but both of them had well over 1,000 respondents. It was an open survey. It wasn't like I, anonymously called 500 developers or something like that. So people chose to participate in it. But the results we have here is just, I'm just talking about folks in the US, and I'm just talking about non-self-employed folks, because there's differences in how you get health care based in the US versus many other countries. In the US, the workplace is the primary conduit for health care. And if you're self-employed, you often have to make decisions about how you access health care in the US. That is different than somebody who is employed. But there's information about that you can take a look at. And I'm going to show 3 different questions we asked that I think are really interesting and directly talks to how we deal with and the attitudes towards mental health inside the tech workplace. So, first question is, do you think that discussing a health issue with your employer would have negative consequences? And we asked about physical and we asked about mental. Physical, over 3/4 say no, there would not be any kind of negative consequence for it. Maybe is 19%. I'm sure probably there's some sysadmins, and it says in your job you're supposed to carry around up to 60 pounds of heavy CRTs and racks and stuff like that. But, those are still things that, maybe there would be negative consequences. For discussing, I guess it depends on the job, depends on the person, but generally pretty low. Only 4% said yes, there would definitely be negative consequences for that. Now, if we look at mental health issues, the no only drops down to 1/3, the maybe doubles, and the yes, oh gosh, math, is 6 times higher. And I think there are some conclusions you can draw from that, and none of them are particularly good. But let's move on to this next question. Would you bring up a health issue with a potential employer in an interview? And I think it's important when we talk about this to put this in the context of legal requirements under the ADA law in the United States that say that for both physical and mental health conditions, an employer cannot discriminate against a potential or existing employee for conditions like that, as long as what they call, and that they're intentionally fuzzy about this, reasonable accommodations can be made. So if you bring up a health issue with a potential employer and it would not particularly impact your ability to do the job, it is illegal to have that as a criteria for not giving you the job. So would you bring up a health issue with a potential employer in an interview? Physical health, 44% said no. Not surprising. I mean, why would I bring it up? Why would I do something that might make people feel weird? Maybe is 44%, probably depends on what it is, probably depends on the nature of the gig. And then 12% said, yes, I would bring it up. That's not an issue, of course not. And then if we look at mental health issues, 85% of people said no, they would not bring it up. Maybe is only 14%. Only 2% of people said yes. Only 2%. And that is anecdotally consistent with the things that people have told me directly. Particularly people who do suffer with mental illness or mental disorders, because they are very concerned about how they're going to be treated in the workplace. Will they be treated empathetically? What will it be like to interact with them? And the interview process is supposed to be this thing where you kind of, optimally, everybody's trying to feel out if this is a good match. Most people are scared to ask if it's a good match for them. So then a third thing, does your employer provide resources to learn more about mental health issues and how to seek help? A key part, particularly in the United States, because again, health care is the primary conduit for it, is the workplace. And there is significant evidence that workplace wellness campaigns make a difference in terms of overall health and well-being of employees. And we'll talk about that for a minute. So does your employer provide resources to learn more about mental health issues and how to seek help? Only 1/4 said yes, they do. 2/5 said no, absolutely not. 2/5 said I don't know. Which would seem like a breakdown in communication. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. I don't know. Maybe they did and I missed it. Maybe they put it in a handbook that I'd never read because they handed it to me when I first got hired and then never talked about it again. Here's the key thing. Sick workers don't work, or they're significantly less productive. And that's just the fact of the matter. That's just the way it is. But change is really hard, and change is scary. And a lot of folks who I believe probably want to do the right thing don't know what to do. And they feel kind of frozen because they don't have good information about what to do. They might be afraid of endangering their workplace. I've certainly heard stories of HR departments telling team leads and supervisors, if somebody comes and talks to you about a mental health issue, you need to stop talking to them and you need to send them down to HR immediately. And I think I understand why they're doing that, but I also think that that makes it far less likely that somebody's going to be open and honest about talking about it, because they're reaching out for help and they're immediately being said, I can't hear this. I mean, it's an anecdotal thing, but I definitely have had people tell me that folks have policies like that. They have those policies probably because they're so afraid of endangering the workplace that they're afraid, well, these supervisors don't, they're going to do something stupid and we're going to get sued. On the flip side, lots of people are afraid of losing their jobs because they might say the wrong thing. And it might start a thing where, well, this is a justification. This is a justification for saying, oh, well, they weren't really a culture fit, or some other horseshit word like that. Now, the folks, me and the other volunteers at OSMI, we'd help, but there's 4 things that I want to give you that you can do right now regarding this. And the first thing and the key thing is that you have to make a commitment to change. You have to make a commitment to change yourself and the kind of things that you say about mental health, the kinds of ways that you think about mental health issues, even if that's not something you struggle with. The fact is that at very least in the general population, 1 out of every 5 people is dealing with it right now. Based on our survey information, there may be some indication that actually rates are higher within the developer community. That is anecdotal, though, to some extent, and there's selection bias in this because it's an opt-in survey. People have to choose to take it, so I have to be careful with it. But our 2016 stuff shows that the rates are somewhere, again, this is people who've chosen to take the survey. The rates we have in the for folks who responded, which is over 1,200 respondents, was 50%. 50% of people self-reported that they were dealing with it, right? They were dealing with some mental health issue right now. So the way that you talk about it, the way that you express yourself about it, and the way you kind of think about it, that has a big impact with the people around you. With your social group, that world around you, you can make a huge difference in that, in the kinds of things that you feel okay with talking about and not okay with talking about. The social group that you may spend the most time with, I know it's mine, is my workplace. Those are people I see most of the time. It's just for better or for worse. I don't know if that's a great thing. But it is the case that, and all those social groups that we interact with, if you make a conscious decision that you don't have to go around and say blab about like the stuff you deal with like I do. I mean, I have a confessional personality and this, yes. But speaking openly about mental health issues, making that commitment to make that I want to see what I'm doing and what I can do differently, because I guarantee you, just listening to somebody talk about mental health without fear can be a life-changing experience for people around you, because I guarantee you they are just as scared and feel just as alone as I did. Absolutely. I hear that every single time I give this talk. Every time. The second thing I'd say is that one of the things we did with money that we received last year in our fundraisers was that we created handbooks specifically designed to educate and inform people about how to change tech workplaces to make them more supportive of mental wellness. No other organization has done this, and we are giving it away for free, and it's Creative Commons licensed. These are handbooks first that deal with how to structure workplaces to be more supportive of mental wellness. The second are guides for the employee and the employer about how to apply the Americans with Disability Act, those laws, to the tech workplace in dealing with mental health issues. Those are things that are freely available right now. And they're written not by me, because I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. They're written by a psychologist, PhD in psychology, and an organizational psychologist who works in HR and does, how organizations work together. It's written by these folks who actually know what they're talking about. The third thing I'd say is I strongly recommend that people take mental health first aid, which is a course. It's an 8-hour course in the US. It's available in, I think, 22 other countries. It cost me $50 to do it. There are some places, like in New York City, it's really easy to take it. You can probably find it for free. And like I said, it's in 22 countries. It actually came out of Australia. Particularly, if you are in a situation where you are influential in the lives of people around you, like particularly influential, like you're a team lead, like you lead an open source project, like you lead, you supervise folks, or you coordinate folks, or things like you're a project manager, or you're a CEO, CTO, whatever, or a founder. This teaches you how to identify people who may be in a mental health crisis. And even if they're not, how to interact with them empathetically and encourage them to seek help, not to diagnose them, not to try to fix their problem for them, which is what developers do. We try to fix problems. And we are not qualified to fix these problems in general. Maybe some of you have dual degrees. You have a background in that. I do not, but I know it's my tendency to try to fix stuff. Mental health first aid has been enormously informative to me personally, and I've been dealing with this stuff for a long time. And you learn a lot about how to interact with people in a way that will actually help them and encourage them to seek help. And the fourth thing is just tell people about this stuff. And this kind of goes back to, if you're making this commitment to change, you start talking about it openly. You choose to go take that course, you say, hey, I'm going to take this course. You don't hide it, right? You go brag about it on Twitter and Facebook or IRC or wherever you folks go. And you take a selfie when you're on lunch break or something like that from it. But you talk about it. Because it's not something we should be afraid of. And secondly, it is something that, because of the fear and stigma, in the absence of active positive reinforcement that it is okay and safe to talk about it, people will assume it is not okay and not safe. And I believe that the survey results that we've done, from stuff we've done, absolutely indicates that. So if you don't actively talk about it, the assumption will be there's some reason why they shouldn't. And that is the way that our culture is right now. I think it is better than it was 20 years ago. But it is not where it can be. And it's certainly not where we deal with other very serious conditions. Groups of conditions like cardiovascular disease, cancer, things like that. So, okay, what's the upside other than just being like a decent human being and actually trying to help people not be in pain and stuff like that? But why try to change the workplace? There's actual quantifiable upsides to making these kinds of decisions to be supportive of mental wellness, to encourage mental wellness in the workplace. It's because it benefits the organization and everyone in it. The fact is that mental wellness means better employees. That is a fact. Employees feel valued and secure and work more effectively when employers demonstrate a commitment to their well-being. I feel far more loyal to somebody who I know gives a crap about what's going on with me and does not view me as simply a resource to be applied to a problem and there will be a solution that, educates us. That they are actually, that part of the, that, and if the value of the organization as a whole if they demonstrate that, I'd be far more interested in working for them. Demonstrating your values is key. And it's key because there's a couple different upsides. One thing I want to say about that is that embracing diversity, which is a major issue in the tech industry as a whole, and also in open source culture and community. Embracing diversity includes people who live with mental illnesses. And in becoming inclusive, businesses both thrive and set standards for others. And that's really key because, again, people want to work with you. It's more likely you're going to be better at recruiting. You're going to get better people. You're going to know that your workplace is supportive and interested in having that the lives of the people who work for them are satisfying and positive. More people want to work someplace that respects them fully, that does not ignore their well-being, physical or mental. Now, in 2015, we did this fundraiser. I talked for a second about it. And we needed to do fundraising so I could pay for travel to go to places like this and talk about things like this. And you know, as some conferences pay for you, some don't. It just varies. So I have to have some money, and I didn't really have enough to do that out of pocket. So I set a goal for $5,000 to do this, and it's Indiegogo campaign, and start that up. And our time to reach that goal was 2 hours. That was really cool and amazing. And really, really special and humbling, very humbling. And the total that we raised over that period of 45 days, I think I put it for 45 days because I was afraid we wouldn't raise enough money and do it fast enough. I wouldn't hit our goal, so I was like 45 days. So the total we raised in that amount of time was $13,600. So with that money and this extra money that we got, we were able to develop this documentation, these documents that we are able to put out, these handbooks. And also just do a lot more awareness raising. And now I've got a team of folks who are helping me out. This is a listing of all the folks who donated in 2015. And there's over 100 names on there. Some of them were, companies that donated large amounts of money. Some of them donated $10. But everyone here donated that campaign, and they're here because what they did was really amazing. And I talked about, I've got a team now of 8 volunteers, and I didn't have that before. I didn't have that because I was kind of afraid of doing stuff that was a little more ambitious. And I was afraid because I didn't want to screw it up and I didn't want to fail. I was afraid to try ambitious things, and I made a conscious decision to try to do more. And it started to really, really come together. Releasing these handbooks is a huge part of that. And then probably the next big thing is we're in the middle of a fundraiser right now. And I can tell you, I set a goal of $10,000 for that, and we got there in about 2.5 days. And it's we're doing 30 days, and we're already over last year. We're over 13,600. I really want to get to 15 because we want to do a video handbook or a video workshop that basically is kind of like this, but things that can talk about how to develop supportive workplaces and how to be supportive in the workplace. Because there are real demonstrable things that the workplace benefits from because of it. So we're doing this fundraiser. And also, the second thing is, if you've ever done work to try to form a nonprofit, it is an enormous pain in the ass. And I am not good at sticking to those kinds of things. So this some of the money would absolutely be used for things like filing for that stuff, because we want to create a 501c3 out of this thing, which is not really a legal entity. It's just some name I came up with. It's like I formed a band, called it this, and now it's a thing, right? And it was a solo act, and now, there's more people involved. But if anybody follows me on Twitter, I've had a bit interesting thing where PayPal, I don't have any money from the fundraiser yet. PayPal froze my account. I don't really know why, because it literally had a zero balance in it. They froze it for 4 or 5 days. They never explained why. I sent in some stuff that they asked for, like a photo ID, things like that. By the way, I'd been a customer of PayPal for 16 years, and they have my social security number on file. I guess that wasn't enough because they limited my account. Couldn't remove any funds from it, and if it did get to in like a week or two when the fundraiser ends and then they start transferring money, some of the money from Indiegogo comes through PayPal, and then some of it comes through whatever they use for credit card processing. The credit card processing goes directly into my checking account that I have set up with it, and the PayPal stuff goes to my PayPal account. And that was about, if I just looked at it right now, that would have been about over $3,000 that would have been frozen in that account. And that sucks. So I want to form a 501c3 and maybe hopefully have less of that issue, and also make all of our deductions tax deductible. If we can do it this year, that means that all the donations for this year will be tax deductible, but I can't guarantee that. But it'd be cool, wouldn't it? But that's going on, and that's going on right now, and I don't want to make a huge deal out of it, but the extra money that we raise makes a real difference in us being able to provide resources. And these are resources that, things like the tech survey, things like these handbooks. I do not believe that anybody else is doing this kind of work in the tech community and the open source community. And I think it's really important work. It's important work for everybody and everybody who's a human being, but this is my tribe, this is my family, this is the group that I ascribe to, or whatever. Can't pick the right words. And so I spend time doing it here. So I need your help. I need you to talk about this and email about it and tweet and post and talk to your business about maybe making a donation. Things like that. There's videos and slides and resources. All this stuff is Creative Commons licensed. We release all of it openly because we want to give it away for free. Normally this stuff would cost a lot of money to hire a consultant in and get this stuff done, because some of the people who volunteer for me, that's what they do. And they gave their own time and were like, this is a really special thing we're doing. We're giving it away for free. So there's videos and slides and all these resources to stuff beyond what we do at OSMI, at osmehelp.org. The 2016 Mental Health and Tech Survey, which is not just a survey for people who deal with mental health issues, but really it's about the attitudes towards mental health in the industry. So everybody should be taking that kind of thing, and that is still open at the link there. And our fundraiser is going on right now. If there's anything I've shown here, any of these URLs or messages or words, meant something to you, the steps that you can take just sharing this stuff makes a real difference in people's lives. And that's why I keep talking about this stuff instead of submitting talks about like JavaScript or PHP or Perl or any of this tech stuff. I've pretty much given up on giving talks like that, because this is by far the thing that I think makes the most impact for me, and this is what I know I can do. So if you can help me out with that, I really, really would appreciate it, and there's a lot of other people who would benefit from it. So thank you for listening. Some info there if you want to check out stuff. And that's what I got right now. So if you have any questions, we can answer that, but that's it for today. So. We have about 5 minutes, something like that. Somebody tell me. We have 1 minute. Is there one question I can answer? Anybody? Bueller? It's all right. I'll be around. Please come up and talk to me. And I am happy to talk to you about whatever aspects you're interested in. So yeah, thank you very much for coming. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate it.